Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the June 20th meeting of the board work session for Methacton School District. Please rise for the pledge.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. In terms of announcements and executive sessions, I do have an executive session announcement. There was an executive session of the board held at the high school on June 20th, 2017, prior to the work session of the board for the purposes of discussion on a legal matter regarding student number 530040368 and student number 530200206. In terms of attendance, we have all board members here with the exception of Mr. Boardman. Mr. Winters is available on the phone this evening. And on to recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. I'll hand it over to Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Mike. This evening, I just want to bring attention to everyone. The printed agenda is missing one item. There are 4 items for presentation this evening. The first one, club and activities. Second one, summer facilities projects. The third one will be transportation update, and the IU is here to provide that update. And the fourth one is my budget presentation. So without any further ado, I'd like Dr. Spivak to come forward and present on clubs and activities. And before he begins, if you recall, last month, the board gave me some direction in terms of addressing the matter that became before them, specifically about clubs and activities and the interests by the Best Buddies group. And I went back and I met with my administration, Dr. Spivak specifically, and others to see if we couldn't evaluate where we were with that particular process. We looked at the information available to us, outlined some procedures and protocols, and the result of that, Dr. Spivak has some updates for the board here this evening for consideration, potentially at next week's meeting. Dr. Spivak?
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe, and I appreciate the school board allowing me to talk a little bit tonight about 2 items that I'm hoping that you might consider for the agenda for next week. The first item, as Dr. Zerbe mentioned, has to do with the approval of 3 high school paid clubs. This would come at no cost to the school district in part of an end-of-year review by our extracurricular committee, which involved the school principal, myself, and the district union rep. We were able to reallocate points based on clubs that were no longer functioning, or that are no longer functioning in the way that is worth having points allocated to those groups. And this is something that we have done on a year-to-year basis. Based on those reallocation of points, I'm recommending consideration for 3 high school clubs that include Academic Decathlon, Teams, and Best Buddies. Teams stands for Test of Engineering Aptitude, Mathematics, and Science. And just to not take too much of your time, I'm going to continue to move through and explain the process of how we got here, but I can certainly answer questions about those 3 specific groups as well at any time. Once the high school administration reviewed the points, we determined that there was enough points that we could allocate to 3 clubs that we believed met our criteria. Large in part, these 3 clubs fit the criteria. We believe they bring enough to the table academically and also to the culture of the building where they fill out our activity list in a way that makes them a necessity at this time. Academic Decathlon has to do with, allows 3 levels of competitors. So we feel that it brings to the table both highly skilled and also students that are just looking to participate, and we believe, like I said, directly correlates to our curriculum. In terms of teams, similar to what you have all probably read about our science fair and how our students are able to bring such an incredible name to Methacton by traveling around the country and competing and being successful, we believe that both academic decathlon and teams are now at the point where, through their performance in state competitions over the past few years, that they will bring some of that same notoriety to the school district. In terms of Best Buddies, I don't think it's any secret the type of impact that they have, not only from the standpoint of inclusion, which is always at the forefront of our district, but also it creates not only connections to the academic world, but also the social world, which obviously the high school experience is supposed to be about. Again, I can go into more detail if you guys would like on all three of those groups. Again, at no cost to the school district, we're just requesting that those three groups be approved, and that's only for at the high school. Second, I'm requesting that the co-curricular activities and coaching compensation program be added to next week's agenda to be considered for approval. This program is twofold. One, it presents in the mind of the committee that has been working for close to a decade. In the mind of the committee, it provides a new set of points, but based off of the old points that is more relevant to today's world in terms of the number of students participating and a number of other factors that the committee considered. Title IX, things like that. For example, just one example of many, boys and girls basketball was off by a point or two for years, and the committee was able to look at things like that and make those appropriate changes. Some changes are small, some changes are a little bit more drastic. More importantly than the initial, what we see as a fix to the current K through 12 activity points and 7 through 12 extracurricular points, is the process that would come along with it. And that process would include guidelines and procedures that would allow for the committee that put this together to meet every other year at a minimum, to reevaluate the standing of the points, and also allow for sponsors and coaches throughout the district to appeal to that committee to inform us, to educate us as a committee on some of the reasons why those categories may not be appropriate any longer for their particular position. And it's important to note that the guidelines and procedures that you would be hopefully voting on next week would include a 9-part scale that would allow the committee to appropriately assess what those sponsors and coaches are appealing to. And those factors include the time factor, so how long is the season or how long does the club meet throughout the year, the participation factor, how many students do you have, the risk of injury, the responsibility involved in the position, the pressure that comes along with the position, the community relations involved in the position, the finances, so how is a coach dealing with a $10,000 budget, or are they not dealing with money at all? Travel, and then off-season requirements. And that off-season would include holidays and weekends. So those are some of the things that would be included in that compensation program that I'm recommending for your approval tonight. If you were to approve either one or both of those items, we as an administration would make sure that you had all of the information that you needed between now and next week to evaluate that in full and be able to make educated decisions when you vote next week.
So let me just, I just want to clarify a comment or two that Dr. Spivak made. You're not approving anything tonight. What we will be looking for is, after we have some discussion on this and ask Dr. Spivak any questions, we are asking whether or not you want us to move forward with his recommendations and place them on the agenda for next week's approval. So that's what we're really asking for. And so if there are any questions, we'll start down at this end.
I don't think I have questions other than a few comments. You had mentioned twice, at no cost to the district, at no cost to the district. And I just wanted it, and I realize why you're saying that these 3 clubs this time is no cost to the district, but I just wanted to make it clear that the issues here for a board was not financial. I realize that extracurricular costs money, but as a board, this was not a financial issue in the last, that had been brought to our attention. So but I do have one question, because I had sat at this table for a year and a half and never had I ever been asked to approve a club of any sort, or a points system, or anything. So are we now, obviously, I'm okay with these 3 clubs moving forward. Personally, that's my comment. I know the point system had to be changed, so after, if we look at it and it's fair, and MEA, if all the parties involved think it's fair, I'm fine with that. But are we now going to be involved in this approval process? Because we had never, ever been asked in the last year and a half, I can't speak for years prior, been asked to be part of a club approval process. And you had mentioned it goes on a lot, and we had never been asked before. So that's a clarification more.
Let me just respond for the first part. The first question you have, and that I need to clarify, is when we mean no cost to district, we mean no additional cost to the district. I want to be clear on that. There's certainly a cost to it. The MEA contract allocates a dollar value per point. Those points then are added up to the against the system that Dr. Spiewak has spoken about, and then there's a dollar amount associated, but it's not additional cost. So meaning the budget that I'm presenting here this evening will cover the clubs that are so presented and possibly approved next week. Dr. Spiewak, I don't know if you want to talk about the other question.
Yeah, just one. If the district at any time would have the opportunity, if there was an initiative that was revolving around elementary math, and the school board in the district determined that there was a club out there that other school districts were utilizing that you felt had the opportunity to have a huge impact on the district, the school board and administration and superintendent would have the opportunity to add that that club at any time. And that is in the contract, and it's understood that the district and school board would have to approve adding a club at any time. This is a little bit different, where if we have a change to the current system, or if we were to add a sports team, or if we were to add a club, it would typically go through the school board in school board approval.
Okay,
So
so
what
I
that
have
means is we haven't added any in a long time. That's
Correct.
the fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the big hubbub last month was, oh, now we're going to get all these clubs that are coming forward, and that's why. So my question is, we're possibly approving these 3. Are there 5 other clubs that you feel like, oh, didn't get it this year and are going to be coming up and asking for it? I just want to make sure, that was the big concern, that we were being unfair. So I want to make sure there's any more disgruntled, unsponsored clubs out there.
No, that's a great question, and I should have mentioned, this is, as an administration, and speaking with Dr. Zerbe, following several board meetings where you guys had conversations, I am working on and feel very good about where we stand in terms of written protocol with guidelines and procedures. I just want an opportunity to be able to sit down with our new high school principal, and also have an opportunity to sit down with union members to make sure that that we're all on the same page in terms of how this protocol is going to be moving forward. But it should allow for procedures to take place prior to it ever getting to Dr. Zerbe or to the school board moving forward.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you very much. The first 3 items that you mentioned, the academic decathlon teams and Best Buddies,
Yes.
you mentioned are for the high school.
Correct.
And the second section, you mentioned that they were 7 to 12 and K to 12, 2 different categories.
Correct.
So a comment was made when the Best Buddies program was discussed last month, that it would be valuable to have that program in Arcola as well as at the high school. Has there been any consideration on that subject?
That has not been at my desk to this point, but I have heard conversations about that, and would certainly be open to those types of conversations, and would be including Amy Mangano, principal at Arcola, in those conversations, and absolutely that would be able to become a part of the process that we're hoping to finalize very soon. But yes, that would absolutely be something that we would consider, and that I would bring to your attention once it was vetted through our building union members and administration as well.
So how does it get to you at that point? Is it a teacher, somebody who wants to sponsor the program? Is it a parent? Is it the principal? Where does it typically start?
It typically would start with either students or a sponsor that are passionate about a certain topic that might turn into a club, and they would see their building administrator, and then the building administrator would then pass it along to myself or Dr. Zerbe, and we would then look at it from there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Spivak. Couple questions here. The 3 clubs that you're recommending for club status, I'm assuming they meet not only the old guidelines for club status and have fulfilled any of those requirements that were the precursor, but also the new club requirements. And the only reason I'm asking that is right now we're still operating under the new ones till we approve the guidelines, so it's hard to approve them under new guidelines. So do they meet all of the requirements necessary?
They do meet all the requirements, and that was vetted through myself, Judy Landis, as the building principal, and also with union representation. So they do meet all the criteria. What it would change, so what we're presenting to you and what you all get copies of, if you would like to consider it for the agenda for next week, would be in addition to the guidelines. So the second part of this, in addition to the guidelines that you would be approving or considering, would also come along with it all of the adjusted points that the committee has recommended. Those would then need to be adjusted either prior to your final approval or after the fact. They would need to be adjusted to reflect these particular changes. So obviously, academic decathlon teams and Best Buddies are currently not reflected in the allocated points that the committee has been working on over the last decade. But in that system is the opportunity for change, and this would become part of that. But they do meet the criteria, and they would need to be added into the current document that shows all of the K through 12 allocation of points.
Got it. Second question, which clubs are we removing?
We're not necessarily removing clubs.
Or changing status, or?
Yes, we have a club. We had an East Asian club that is no longer functioning, so it's been left vacant. We have Reading Olympics, and I'll explain this one before I say it, just so that I don't give any misconceptions as to why we believe the committee, the high school committee, believes this should happen. In the past, it hasn't functioned in the same capacity over the years that I've been the activities director, but in the past there were points allocated to a club called SAD, Students Against Drunk Driving. It is our belief at the high school that administratively, through whether it be through prior to the prom, or whether it be through assemblies or health class or initiatives through the teachers or administrators, that we are able to address those types of alcohol, drug-related topics without allocating points to a group that, in all honesty, wasn't holding its membership for many, many years. That position then became vacant, and we believe provided an opportunity for us to reallocate to a group that would be able to bring something new to the table and allow us administratively to continue to address those types of hot topics like drugs and alcohol and violence and things like that.
Okay. And Reading Olympics, is that just at the high school level, or was this?
This was, yeah, these clubs that we reallocated points were just clubs that at one point or another existed and functioned at the high school.
So it's not Reading Olympics that is at the middle
Correct,
school?
totally different. Yep.
Okay.
Totally different, meaning a different group. Same topic, different
They're
group.
still okay
Yep.
with what they're doing?
Correct.
And then we talked about the new point system. Have you done any calculations with the new point system process from a costing perspective, just to give us an idea whether it nets fairly similar, or it's a 5% down, 10% up, whatever it might be?
There has been, over the years, so over the decade of looking at this, those numbers have been run. It is challenging and confusing to find a bottom line, because the way the point system works is if you have a coach who's been coaching a high-profile sport with a large allotment of points for 20-plus years, that number is drastically different than someone in their first or second year. So as turnover takes place, that number drastically changes, and if you multiply that times the number of athletic positions and activity positions, those numbers are all across the board. But, and Dr. Zerbe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we have had many conversations over the years on those numbers, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. That would absolutely be a part of you knowing those types of situations prior to voting.
Yeah, I guess.
We have those items costed
All right.
out.
I mean, I would just say, based on the current staffing, here's what the numbers look like now versus with the new points. I know you're going to have change, and it's hard to calculate.
I guess I can tell you that we have a calculation within a year.
Okay.
Okay.
And it shows both the new and the old system?
It will show the change in...
The differential,
It'll
however
show
you
the
want to do it.
differential, correct.
Okay. All right, perfect, thank you.
Thank you for presenting us with
Thank you.
this information. Just a couple of additional questions. When we were talking about the clubs that we removed, was anyone being paid in those clubs that didn't have the membership or anything in this current year? Was money being allocated to any of these clubs?
Those were, I don't want to say with 100% certainty, but those were, the idea was that they were vacant at that time. So for example, our our SAD sponsor was no longer sponsoring the club, and it was an opportunity for us to reevaluate. I will say there are other points potentially out there, but it would be more appropriate for us to consider those after the point system goes through. There are certain clubs within that system that we believe would be better suited, for example, to be community education or done in a different capacity. And so there is potential for additional points to surface once the committee is able to take a look at the current clubs and the points allocated to them.
Okay, thank you. My last question is, I guess my biggest concern in this area is the idea that there's a subjective and objective part of this. And I just want to make sure, because you said it a couple of times that it met our criteria and that we'll have processes and procedures going forward. Are we trying to eliminate as much of the subjectivity of which can be clubs and which can be, special interest groups or whatever you want to call it? I want to make sure that in the process of doing this, that we make this as objective as possible.
Yes, there are challenges to your concern, but to the best of our abilities, we have created criteria, a bullet list of criteria that we will apply when considering that. With that said, we tried our best to be detailed. However, it's certainly my opinion and the opinion of several others that you may have 100 students participating in one club and 7 students participating in another club, and that club with those 7 students, their impact and their connection to the curriculum and the community impact and the name that it brings to Methacton and how it's the number of people that it's impacting outside of that club may certainly be more impactful. So it's my opinion that just because you have more students participating, or just because you meet for more hours, or just because you do more weekends, it doesn't necessarily mean that club would be more impactful than the other. So we were very careful about putting detailed criteria about, well, if you don't have this many kids, we can't consider you, because we believe that would turn our backs on potential for some very impactful clubs. But we do have a long bulleted list of criteria in the new procedures that we're looking at.
Yeah, Dr. Spivak makes an excellent point. I pushed him and his folks to try to get as much detailed criteria, but these are the issues that were coming back. And I think the good thing at the end is the committee that will do the evaluation is closest to these students and closest to the clubs and really know what's happening on a day-to-day basis with the students and the impact that they're making. So I think the committee itself is in a good position to use as much objectivity as possible, but rely on their instinct and their observation on a regular daily basis to render decisions on these cases. Any other questions?
Okay, yeah, so I support seeing this on the agenda for next week. I just would ask that as soon as possible, we get all of the detail behind this so that we can be educated ahead of next week. And I guess before we move on to Jim, do we want to see if Paul has any questions from the phone?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Real quick, Dr. Spivak, you mentioned the word pressure. Can you define the word pressure and the criteria setting for point setting, please?
I will certainly do the best I can to define my view of that, but this is terminology that comes from a very large committee that looks at all of this, and it's not something that we have put in play in the past, so it's not something I can look back on and have evaluated in my years with activities in athletics. But I'll give you an example. If you are coaching a sport that is consistently in the media, where you're doing interviews and your wins and losses are held to a significantly higher standard with many more community members aware of your successes and failures, that would ultimately equal more pressure on a day-to-day basis than a sport that maybe only the students participating and their parents and people close to the program are following their wins and losses. What you're going to see in the media, whether it be social media or the newspapers, certain sports are certainly more high profile when it comes to that than others. So the pressure to compete at a high level is different in certain activities than others.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, did Best Buddies specifically ask to be moved formally in prior years? And if so, specifically to Andrea's point, what was the process breakdown that it didn't come forward?
I'm really sorry. I missed the first part of the question there.
I'll repeat it if it's easier. Just, Paul asked, had Best Buddies come forward earlier to be a sponsored club? And if so, what was the breakdown?
I have to say, whether this, I don't know how appropriate this is, but if I'm being fully honest, what took place over the past month or two had legitimately zero bearing on where our points committee at the high school with Chris Lloyd, myself, and Judy Landis, we would have been coming to you with the exact same three clubs, probably right around this time, either way. And it ultimately was a situation where we happened to find points that we believe could be reallocated in a way that would provide our list of current activities, which we're very proud of, that would take us to a higher level than it was in previous years. So either way, I think the process would have been the same. What is going to be different are the guidelines and procedures that we're currently working through.
Paul, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Jim, is there anything?
To follow up on what Paul was saying, because I'm not sure if this was his intention, but did Best Buddies come forward and request club status prior to the last couple of months?
Absolutely. There's been conversation with several groups, these three included, over the years, both with Chris Lloyd, who's a union rep at the high school, and myself, representing to us some of the things that they were able to accomplish, the number of students that were impacted, and their hope of one day being considered to be a paid sponsored club. And that has absolutely gone on for, in the 7 years that I've been involved with activities, those types of situations have happened, but without adding new clubs or finding a reallocation of points like we did this year through our end-of-season evaluation of the current points, we just weren't able to allocate points to those clubs at those times.
So when was the last time that a new club was approved prior to this? To Andrea's point, in the year and a half that we've been on the board, we haven't seen any come forward. So how long has it been since a club has been approved?
I have not gone to the board with the approval of a new club to this point in my years.
So at least 7 years?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
Unless I'm missing something that happened without either my knowledge or without coming to the school board, whether it was, there are certain things that take place where there's name changes that may not necessarily require school board approval. And that type of stuff has taken place in the past where an initiative changes, but it's the same sponsor. For example, this Teams group has operated, for those of you that have heard of it before, has operated as Jets in the past. And the name change from Jets to Teams does change some of the things that they're looking to accomplish. If we go back 5 years and let's say that Teams or Jets was one of our groups, I would like to think that our in-house building level group would have been able to change the name from Jets to Teams without school board approval. But in terms of a brand new paid club, I'm not aware of this process having taken place in the recent past.
Okay. And I know the Best Buddies program, I was under the impression that it does currently exist at Arcola. Will it be able to continue to operate if it's not a club?
Absolutely.
I was under the impression that we're approving Best Buddies as part of a national organization. So if we approve them as a club at the high school, how does that separation then exist between the high school and Arcola?
Just as they've been able to operate, the immediate answer would be just as the high school group has been able to operate, the middle school group would be able to operate, and conversations would be, certainly could be had in terms of consideration moving forward. It would be logical to say that if you had a paid sponsored group in the high school, and if it is the same group taking place at a different building, conversations for the district to add that would certainly be something that we would be able to do.
So is there a different sponsor at Arcola?
I know the sponsor is not Jennifer Yoakum, who is the sponsor at the high school, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think at Arcola, Kim, and I could be wrong, that they might handle it through Arcola Connections. Because I asked my kids about that, and they said, no, that's not formally Best Buddies down there, but it's Best Buddies through Arcola Connections. Could be wrong, but that's what I was told.
Sometimes the kids are the best source of information on these things.
Those guidelines and criteria will not just apply to the high school, they will apply K through 12. So those opportunities to go to a building administrator and share a group like the Middle School Best Buddies group to be considered for club status would be there once that system went through.
Okay, and to reiterate what Mike has said, that the sooner we can get the information on all of this, the better. And just as a kind of global comment on process here, whenever we have more information on an item that's on the agenda, I'd like to see it rather than have to wait until the voting meeting to see it. So for example, for this criteria, it sounds like the criteria exist in a written form right now. It would have been really helpful to have that here in front of us tonight so we could actually discuss that instead of the idea of the criteria. I'd like to be able to look at the criteria and have a conversation here about that as well. It would save us some time when we get to the voting meeting so that we're not sitting there and spending another hour going through all the criteria and questioning that as well. So just as a point of, for the administration, I guess going forward, it'd be good to have more information.
Thank you for the comment, but most certainly, as you might imagine, both of these items have a certain sense of history to them, and I thought it was appropriate that we at least bring it to your attention and to determine whether or not you wanted to move it forward. So we have the clubs. I've heard a couple of board members suggest that they do want to bring this thing forward. We'll get you the documents associated with the point system, and we'll bring that forward. Mr. Roth, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Spiewak, for bringing this, for your presentation. And I look forward to reading that document and seeing how the new program works. And to be honest with you, I concur with you, Paul, that I don't remember ever approving a club on 7 years that I've been here. And the last time I heard much talk about it was when Dr. Quinn's regime. And even then, they were just starting to talk. It was all talk. There was really nothing done about it. So I'm glad to see it's finally getting done and taken care of and reevaluated. Thanks again for your work on this. I appreciate it.
Do we need to establish a policy around this? Does it need to be adopted into policy?
I don't believe that's an appropriate step at this stage of the game. The two things that we're talking about approval are to approve the 3 clubs that Dr. Spivak has brought before you. And that's part of a process that we may not have taken place for the last 7 years, but it was a part of a process that until a number of superintendents ago put a freeze on the whole club process. It was something that is not only outlined in the MEA agreement for that to occur, but is something that was done in the past, but certainly not in our history. In terms of the way the points are allocated, that document in of itself will be the policy for which we will follow if you approve it. As how we allocate those
the policy and guidelines don't need to be adopted into a school board policy.
What needs to be adopted into a school board policy?
The actual policy and procedures for the club and the points, that doesn't need...
I don't think that...
Okay.
I think it's best handled by the building administration and the activities director. I believe once, as Dr. Spivak had mentioned, once he has that time to review that, the proposed, we'll call them regulations, with the new building principal, we'll be able to share them and make them available on our website so that everybody can see them. Okay. And so we know exactly what it is that we are to follow.
And also to that point, I think just as a matter of course, the policy committee tries to avoid memorializing that sort of thing because it makes it much more difficult to make changes as needed and adjust based on the needs of the district.
So is it the interest of the board to move these 2 items forward with new information within the next day or so?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Spivak, very good. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
The next on, I'm just going to, I said item 3, the transportation update. I'm going to, since the IUs are guests here this evening, I'm going to ask them if they wouldn't mind going second. And I know Dr. Sosnovic, you might have some comments as well.
Hi, thanks for having us back. A lot of good things have happened since we've last were here. So tonight my plan is to just give you a little bit of an update and field any questions that you may have. The first week in May, there were 5 of us that spent a week-long training session with the Orbit software company, and we learned the ins and outs of the routing software. So it was Donna and myself and 3 first-student people that did the training. On May 23rd, we re-met the whole team, the administration from Methacton, us, Orbit Software, and First Student. We all kind of got together. At that point in time, the bus stop analysis was completed, so we reviewed that, and then we set our goals and a timeline for the routing project. That Friday, before the holiday, on May 28th, one of the bus drivers from First Student actually spent the whole day up in Pottstown with the software company going through the specifics of Methacton School District. So you may be able to travel down Germantown Pike, may say 45 miles per hour, but we all know that at 7:30 in the morning, that's probably more like 20 miles per hour. So the bus driver, who's very familiar with the community, went up there, did height restrictions, weight restrictions, what bridges can be crossed with a big bus, what can't, speed limit, so that as we started to perform the routing, we had good information. Then from May 30th through today, we have they have been working very, very, very hard. And to date, we have met all our milestones. Woodland, Eagleville, Arrowhead are all complete. They are routed and road tested. Worcester is routed and will be road tested tomorrow. And thereafter, all the secondary schools will be totally completed by June 30th. Our next steps then are so each school is individually routed and road tested, so then the next steps after that is to tier them. And then the first 2 weeks in July, the bus drivers will then again road test them real time to make sure we're on board. And after that, the community, I think, was is it postcard or school messenger? I'm not sure how the communication is going to go out, but after the second week in July, the community members will be notified of their bus stops. At that point in time, it will be bus stops only, because we're still going to try to pinpoint any kind of last-minute things in the timing. What am I missing? I can't see. I can't talk and speak without my... And then August 1st, the runs will be ready to be posted for the drivers to review, and the bidding process will begin. The other exciting thing that's happened is the Community Transportation Committee had reconvened. So that was approximately, I think, 12 community members and administration from MATHACT and ourselves and First Student. We all got together. This group, we reviewed the reasoning behind some of the stop changes. We discussed the safety first protocols that we are really strongly standing behind. We reviewed the frequently asked questions, which now I believe are posted on the MATHACT and Transportation website, and also the communication that I believe went out on June 16th to the community. So our goal is to get the community input and to communicate as much as possible beforehand, so there are no surprises when the school starts. So that's where we stand now. Any questions?
Any questions?
Just wanted to emphasize 2 points. One point that was not discussed. The first communication that we sent out was this previous Friday, just informing the community of what's to come and what they can expect, why we were doing things, and that was really driven from the transportation committee that we've had. The second communication, which she indicated is going out, is the second week of July approximately. It will be through a mailing house, and that's going to provide the bus stop only information. And that's, again, last year we sent all this information out second week of August, and there were a lot of families calling, and that increased calls. We had to build a call center. So what we're doing is spreading out the communications, informing families of the bus stop, and not necessarily the time until all the tierin's done, so they could just know where their kid is going to be on the street picked up. The third communication will happen, as in previous years, in the approximate time window of the second, third week of August, where we'll actually send a full bus assignment. So that'll include the bus stop, the number, when you're going to be picked up and dropped off. So I just want to make that point of clarification. And then the other thing I wanted to emphasize is these were originally discussed testing all of the routes twice. Through the process in which we've laid out, all of the runs are being tested 3 times. And that's done so by one, as we get the routes from First Orbitz, the routing vendor, we test them right away. As she mentioned, Worcester will go out and get tested tomorrow. Once that's all completed, we tier all of the routes, meaning high school, then high school bus might go to Arcola, then it might go run a run at elementary. All that tiering is done. We will rerun those. The third one comes when the actual bid process takes place with the drivers. Once the drivers have them and they have their routes, they naturally go and run their routes, so they'll provide additional feedback. So we're getting a lot of insight from drivers. We're having veteran drivers do all of this work for us and very familiar with the area and been providing great feedback. So it's been a very good process, and like she said, we have met all of the milestones, and I foresee us meeting the remainder ones moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic. Any questions from members of the board? To my right? No? How about to my left?
So last year when we talked about doing the runs, one of our objectives was to reduce the amount of time that children spent on the buses. Are we still focused on a maximum time of, I think it was 50 minutes?
That was discussed again at the community meeting, and I believe that the 50-minute timeline is still going to stay as much as feasibly possible. Is the goal of the runs.
Okay. And doing a run, I think, in July, even in May, when it's coming to the end of the school year, is far different than September. So
Right.
will we be allocating an additional amount of time expected for the runs?
Go ahead.
I'll address previous point and this one. She said, relative to I believe, it's not I believe. Our goal and our focus and direction to the routing company was to meet the guidelines of the 50-minute set forth, in previous years. Now, granted, it might be give or take, but our goal to them, at all routes to us, when tested, have to meet that criteria. Your second point regarding when the routes were actually being run. So we were able to get 2 of the schools tested during the window of when school was still in session. However, as she mentioned before, we've had, when school was in session, experienced drivers actually go and test various roadways that she gave you the Germantown example during the times in which they would be run. So that's where the timing adjustments were done in the upfront prior to any of the routing. So that was all pre-built into the actual software itself. So anything that we would have to take consideration for were high traffic areas or something like that. So we feel confident in getting these runs. They will be appropriately timed when we have normal traffic patterns during the school year. With that said, too, we are very cognizant of the fact that if a run is executed and it is right at that time or a little bit over, we look at it, because we want to have a buffering within that, too, to account for any additional traffic. So we did consider all those points.
Also, another consideration was the number of children at the bus stop. So we're putting in load times. So obviously, a bus stop with 3 children is a much shorter load time than one that would have 12 children. So that's all being taken into consideration. And this software does give us a printout of alerts. So if the driver is not meeting the goal, we will know that and be able to readjust and contact the families as needed.
Ms. Hackett, any other questions? Okay, Mr. Ryan?
Brenda asked the one question in terms of the time on the bus. The other one was, we had heard in the past that we weren't fully utilizing the software itself. Have we found things within the software with the week-long training with Orbitz that will, enhance our process and make things easier?
So not being familiar with what was happening before, I'm very confident that we now know the ins and outs of the software, and I do believe there are things such as load times and stuff like that that I could see first student, I don't think, ever took that into consideration before. So I do believe that the software will be utilized properly. Again, and we've had the experienced bus drivers from the get-go, knowing this road's this, or you can't have a large bus on that bridge, or they've really been so those things are all marked in the software. So even if something happened and there was a catastrophe and anybody who was trained couldn't be there that day and we needed to create a new stop, that's built in now to the software. So all those road hazards, all those things are built in.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I want to say thank you, especially with the timeline. Quite frequently, we sit up here as a board and we fall behind timelines. I really appreciate the fact that you're staying on key.
And when you're dealing with diverse groups where you have first student, you have methactin, it keeps everybody on track. So it is a good way to gauge where we are as a team.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Reese?
First, thank you. But also, I wanted to reiterate for everybody, I got my first phone call in 6 years in the middle of the day. Scared me to death because I thought either somebody was in trouble or sick. To confirm where my children get on and off the bus, and they were checking. So I was like, woohoo, thank you. No, that had never happened before. So thank you, to reiterate with what Mike said. One thing I did not hear, and I could have missed it, are the bus drivers picking their routes a little bit earlier this year? No, because it's a union thing.
Yeah, they are posted August 1st. They have 5 days to review them. They are then selected by the drivers in order of seniority, and then they go out and run them. It's the standard timeline as we've had every year. The difference is we are doing all of the route testing that was never really done until the drivers got their routes in August. We've now done it in June, and we'll be wrapping it up early July.
I bring that up because I've been very lucky with my children's bus drivers. They've all been phenomenal, but I know due to the reroutes, they lost their favorite bus driver with another great bus driver, and I would imagine those bus drivers are going to change because the routes are different with one less building. So I was just curious about that. And then this isn't really with the new system. Again, thank you for doing such a careful job. We haven't discussed in a while the lateness issue. There had not so much at the elementaries, I don't believe, but there had been a lateness issue at Skyview and Arcola, which is a big deal. And since there's teachers in the room, like a late student is a big deal. So I didn't know if that had been improved, because we haven't heard much, and it has nothing to do with next year as much as, that's important that we...
Are you referring to the lateness of buses getting to the school for drop-off?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, that was all part of the process of evaluation. So this was a full encompassing review of the routing of Methacton students to and from school. So as we went through last year, we took diligent notes into what were our pain points, and those were shared with the routing team, and we provided them when students needed to be staged. For example, at elementary, we'd like to get them there by, say, 8:50. The bus is sitting there. That way we could get them in the building by 8:55. Those type of, all those items were reviewed with the principals then shared then with the routing team. So those pain points that like one you just mentioned, would be alleviated next year.
Mr. Winters, do you have any questions, sir?
No, I'm okay, Dave. Thanks.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, thank you so much for your update this evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda, we have Mr. Fretz, Director of Facilities, to give a brief summary update on summer projects. Mr. Fretz.
Good evening, everyone. I was a little delayed today getting here because we had an incident at a memorial service for one of the members from today's team who passed away this week, so I just handing this out now, and I apologize for that. All right, what you have in front of you, you had asked for, it's the updated Summer 17 priority worksheet. As you have seen before, it's just updated with some other costs, POs, proposals where they got sent out, purchase order amounts, etc. Some details here. So going to category 1, door hardware, core replacement remains the same at this point. I do have a meeting set up again this week to take care of some other details associated with that, which are software related things and key box things. But what you're seeing there is the actual cost for the purchase orders for just the cores in the purchase order amount. Anybody have any questions with that one? 2.0 miscellaneous architectural projects. I want to point out the first one where we talked about 2.1, which was fix the seals on the windows over at Eagleville. We originally had an estimated amount that we carry here for this amount of $100,000. We had met with a group called the Gordian Group, part of the KPN purchasing group, and they actually gave us a proposal, and you can see the total amount on the far right-hand side under proposals for $519,000. That equates to what they actually looked at and saw as far as their investigation and actually have the ability to do the work now. But right now, in talking with Fidavia, they are unfortunately not here tonight for obvious reasons. But they feel that if we carry this into the next year, into the budgeting for next summer's projects, we may get better numbers by carrying it outside of the Gordian Group to do that work. So we're asking to do, at this point, anything that I need to do for any kind of immediate repair and address, just like we've been doing with maintenance, et cetera, there, just carry it through this year and then deal with it next summer. You see there the handrail repair. We have a purchase order awarded for that amount under the purchase order amount of $29.98. Stage review is coming up on 6/22 with a purchase order amount of $3,000, and you see there it's listed as NTE in the purchase order column, which stands for not to exceed. So we have a not to exceed number on that. 2.4, we had the auditorium ceiling investigation that took place. Right now I feel that it's clean and they did a nice job, got through it. I'm just awaiting their report right now, but that work has been completed there. Looking at code review, we have the RFP, Fidavia's issued out RFPs for that. We're waiting for the responses back. I saw some communications about it, but we don't have that. That's that 2.5 number. 2.6 was relocating the folding door in the gym wall. That got completed actually 6/19. That work's done and complete for that amount. Arcola restrict access to the catwalks. That's gates are in fabrication for that right now, and the purchase order amount was $1987. 2.8, we have the expansion joints. I'm still awaiting a proposal on that work. Anybody have any questions regarding 2.0?
Yeah, I just have one question. It's the same question I've had in the past with the fixed window seals. It seems like this number is getting worse and worse as we're looking at. Are we still talking about fixing window seals? Or are we now at the point with where this number's at? Are we replacing windows?
No, the glass is fine. From what we've seen, the glass is fine. The question is, looking at it, we want to make sure we're being very thorough in what we do. So there's some forensic work that would need to take place, and they're looking for end dams around the windows to make sure that we're not getting any infiltration around there. That would be one. So they kind of gave us a scope, and what you're seeing was their top end on this. But really, it starts from the forensics of the windows to replacing the gaskets, removing the caulking around the outside of the aluminum frame where the aluminum frame meets the masonry. So that would be removed, replaced, and then you would have the interior work in every classroom to re-caulk the frame if in fact we had to take a whole window out because those end dams weren't present that was allowing that to happen. We'd have to remove the window, cut the gasketing, re-caulk it, repaint that edge, and take care of the turf, because a lot of this stuff is where we'd have to get in with a high reach to get up to the second floor, so we'd have some damage on the turf likely that we would have to take care of. All those things were included in that number.
And just as a follow-up to that, the Gordian Group that's listed here?
Yes.
Were they co-stars? Or how did we come up with the Gordian Group, and do we have other estimates?
See, so the way that works is KPN is handled through the CSIU, and that's the Keystone Purchasing Network. The Gordian Group got awarded one of 6 contractors in Pennsylvania, or I won't say contractors, it was a dividing Pennsylvania in 6 different categories. And then they go out to 26 different, they went out for bid for 26 different groups that bid on the work. And then a local company actually got the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, and the general contracting work. So it's one contracting firm that's handling this portion of the state, and that's then handled by the Gordian Group to work through and come up with the number. So the number has already been publicly bid, and that's how they go about doing that. It gives you an option, and that's the big benefit. With the time frame that we are working on right now to do this work, there was no way that this was going to go out, hit the street, go out for regular bid, do all the professional services, the 3-week requirement for advertising, be able to do that and land a project and get it started at this time of year when you're looking at the contractors, or a lot of contractors, of course, are already doing schoolwork and doing that kind of work. So that gave us, that's what this did. We were in that situation, and this is the way that we could do it if we so chose. But by looking at the numbers, we're thinking that it may be better off to wait.
Thank you.
Does it make sense? Oh, I'm sorry, Kim.
Go ahead, Scott.
My only comment was, does it make sense to identify the worst of the windows and at least attack them this year?
In order to know what we did, what's there, we would end up having to go in and do those forensics. Now, you don't want to pick one and say, okay, well, we made a decision based on one application, because you know that when they go through there, they could be hopscotching around the window because they got this window size, so they were working on that at this part of the building and they put them in, then they ran out. So the only way that if we believe that we want to be safe about it, the high road, is to check every window for the dams and to see that the proper things are installed in the original installation.
Was checking every window contemplated initially in the AEM study?
I can't tell you that without going back through it.
I think we need to understand that, because obviously if we're 5X off, there's an issue.
Yeah, and I'd look back here and could tell you, but I don't remember what they carried. They carried 200 or something, or I guess they carried 100. That's what we carried here. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that what we do, we're doing the right thing. So maybe it's something we want to look at and say, maybe you're right, that we want to look back and see about doing some forensic stuff yet this year to know where we were going, because the better scope we give, even in the future, to the contractor, the better off we'll be.
Yep.
So, of course, I have questions about the window seals as well. Because, yeah, that's a big jump. Do you happen to know what the AEM estimate was? I seem to remember it being around that $100,000.
And I think that's correct, yes.
Okay, and tonight was the first time that I heard it explained this way, that it actually makes sense. When you're talking about fixing the window seals, I, in my mind, kept thinking of this as, well, what would it cost to just replace the windows? But what you're describing is a process that involves actually, in some cases, maybe taking the window out and fixing everything around the window. But the window itself is fine. It was just the way that the window was installed into the rest of the building that could be the problem.
Correct.
Okay, so that helps me to get some perspective on why the cost is so high. And I think that's it. That's it for right now. Thank you.
Continue.
Okay. Moving to 3.0, that was the roof maintenance. We said before, this is ongoing. We have a roof, a rain. We check and make sure if we have leaks, we're going out and get them, so that hasn't changed. The roof investigation in 4.0, I have a meeting scheduled with the roofing consultant on the 22nd here to talk about that and be moving forward with some ideas and some plans there. 5.0 miscellaneous MEP projects and investigations. One thing I want to point out, RFP for 5.1 was issued, waiting the response. 5.2, same thing, RFP issued, awaiting response. 5.3, replace smoke detectors and wiring, that was at Arcola for $24,453. That number actually was only the material costs. So in the first time I didn't say that looking at it, but when we looked at it, I said, oh yeah, that's material costs only, and that was underneath prevailing wage number that we were okay to buy. We're still looking at, this company came back and said, oh, well, we are CoStar. So it's a simplex product. It's very proprietary. It's an alarm. It also has to do with, their ability to warrant the system. So I can't just give it to anybody to do because it's their system, their software, their risk. So they came back with a number of the installed price of $53,020.98. And that's why that number went up, because they weren't including the prevailing wages. And that's how that got to that number. So rescue area assistance, so you see the purchase order has been issued for that work in the amount of $98, and that was for Skyview and Arcola. 5.5 was the area protection in the high school. That purchase order was also issued, and you can see the purchase amount of $46.26. We have some 5.6 was the emergency tech lights, where RFP was issued also on that. The repair and rescue and assistance, also at the high school, was awarded, and the purchase amount was $11,458. Any questions on any of the fives?
Questions on this one? No? Any questions? Ms. Hackett?
On the ones where the RFP was issued and you're awaiting the response, is it likely that we'll be able to do those things this year?
Yes. Yes, it is. We're just, Fidavi's involved, the stuff's coming to them. As soon as we get that sorted out, we're trying to make sure we're on it. We know some of the back work on it, so trying to see that we get it done. 6.0, relocation of students. You can see on the proposed start dates, you see them on the far right. You can see the purchase order for number 1 was issued for the amount of $13,813. That was for the Arrowhead and Woodland Worcester partitions. 6.2, that's the labor to install. I'm still waiting for a proposal to do that work and expect that we should have that within the week. Design and permits, we have received the permits for the partitions work for Lower Providence, is also Worcester, and have a scheduled to pick up actually the one from Worcester tomorrow. The other one from Lower Providence is here. And then you get into the 6.4, which is the moving costs. And you see where we are right now with that. And still anticipate some others, but you can see where our actual purchase orders are amounting to right now. Anybody have any questions on 6.0? Okay. 7.0 are the administrative selected projects, funding the out of the budget that we had talked about. We have those 7.1, those tables were placed on hold. The 7.2 classroom painting plan, we had originally carried $35,000, where I had walked with actually a painter that gave us that number, and that's a pretty bad number, because when we look back at it, actually in the book, AEM carried 200 in there. But Gordian Group, again, was asked to give us a number on that, and they worked up their numbers and came up with a proposal of 202, which was close for the whole building, but right now we're looking at the same thing. Maybe we could reduce some of that scope and keep it within that number and do some work, selected rooms in that building this summer.
Is that it, Mr. Fetz? Okay. Let's take the microphone to Mr. Winters. Mr. Winters, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any questions to the left? Mr. Ryan?
Just one question. In terms of the classroom painting for Skyview, what was the last comment that you made, that the number, the 202, that is inclusive of how much of the school are we talking about?
That would have been the whole school.
That would have been.
Yeah, that would have been the whole school. So we have some selected projects, so we could back off and go back to that number. I met with Ms. Gorla on that and talked about it, and have gone back through and just waiting another proposal to do it, and still anticipate being able to do like 10 or so rooms in there.
Okay.
And,
thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Fetz.
Thank you very much.
The next item on recognition of guest speakers is the budget presentation. I have a handout for members of the board. It should be noted that this budget presentation was posted 72 hours prior to this meeting. It's up online. The document that the board has in front of them is a condensed version of that in an effort to save paper and to get to the most important aspects. These items, this budget was also presented to the Finance Committee at its regular meeting held last week. And I'm going to go through the presentation for the board's consideration and vote on the 27th of June 2017. In your handout on slide 13 and 14, both of these slides represent 5-year projections. Slide 13 is the projection with a tax increase in each of the years 2019 through 2022, while slide 14 is projected with the Act 1 index increase. So 13 has no tax increases built into the projection, where slide 14 has the Act 1 index included in the projection. And in general, you can see that in slide 13, where there are no tax increases anticipated in the 5-year projection, we slowly run into deficit until about 2022, about $8.8 million. If in fact we look at the 5-year projection for the slide 14, that includes the Act 1 index, we are finding ourselves closer in 2022 at about $914,000 in deficit. So quite a difference. That's considering the projection assumptions being the same. And if I'd ask the board to just flip back to the last slide in your presentation, slide 58, it should be the second to last page. And I'll give you a second to get back there. The title of it says 5-year projection assumptions 2019 through 2022. The recommendation of the board at the last meeting, I included additional detail as to what was included in the major areas of these projections. A lot of them have already been included, but there was several others that I'll make note of what had changed. So under revenue, we talked about a growth rate based on the assessed value as of 4/25/2017. We talked about an annual growth rate of about 0.5% of taxable assessed value, earned income tax growth rate of 2%, annual collection rate of 95.77. That is the collection rate for this year, and that is the collection rate that's projected out for the remaining years in this 5-year projection. The growth rate projected for transfer tax investments and interim real estate are listed there at 0.2%, 0.25%, and 0.5% respectively. All of the revenue is projected at 0% other than that associated with Social Security and PSERS. The projected year-end surplus of $800,000 is added to the ending fund balance of June 30, 2017. So that is a new item on the list of revenue. All the previous items were listed throughout our budgetary process. On to expenditures. Under staff salaries, the assumption is 2% increase for all staff. That is with a note. The note says the finalized employee contracts could significantly impact projections in salary, benefits, PSERS, Social Security, etc. So just to be aware that these projections, while they have 2% added in there, may not necessarily reflect what the contracts may produce, either up or down related to that number. The next item, prescription, is based on the forecasting centers for Medicare and Medicaid at 19.6% for each of the forecasted years. Medical is based on the AON, which is our administrative which was our administrative arm for the healthcare consortium, for a 3-year consortium at rate at 2019 at 6.9%, 2020 to 22 at 6.3%. PSERS as projected on November of 2016 by the administration of PSERS, and that's inclusive of 2019 at 34.18%, all the way up to 36.4% in 2022. Interest and principal is based on the schedule plus $325,000 of new debt service added annually. So if the board recalls, we were contemplating, and we had previously put into this budget projections whereby we were trying to borrow $10 million in each of the next 7 years or 5 years as per these projections. And based on a lot of conversations with the Finance Committee and Property Committee, we felt it was most appropriate to land on an actual increase in the actual debt service associated with the budget, and then use those dollars to determine what we're able to borrow at the time we want to borrow. So we may be able to borrow $7 million, we may be able to borrow $5 million. It will depend on the market at the time. The next item, there's a $1,915,000 of net operating balance projected in 2018 that will be added to the annual $200,000 budgetary reserve. So the $1.9 million and the $200,000 are now added to the budgetary reserve as part of the budget documents, the PDE 2028, and any of the other documents outlined here in this presentation. And that number, that 1.9 million is actually up from the last presentation that I provided you. It was about 1.8 at the time, and I'll tell you why that has changed in another slide in just a few minutes. Now, things that were added in addition to the other expenditures, general supplies are budgeted at 0% increases over each of the next 5 years. Special education is budgeted at 6%. Transportation is based on contracts, so for 2019 it's 2.5%. For 2020 through 22 it's 1.7%. Tuition to charter schools is budgeted at 5.8%. Vocational ed is based on the Act 1 projected index. Employee tuition reimbursement is budgeted at 0 increase, and unemployment compensation is budgeted at 1% increase. And all those additional items are based on historical trends for these projections. And last on this slide, it says about the capital fund. The capital fund as of 4/30/2017 has $1,389,000, of which $691,000 is part of the capital campaign fund. Now, if the board would be so kind to just go back to the beginning of this presentation. And the purpose of the assumptions, because I had to add so many other assumptions and detail them out, I had to put them on another slide instead of renumbering all the slides, which was actually done, unfortunately, manually. That's why the assumptions got done at the back of this presentation. Next, the next slide, it would be slide 15 in your handout. It goes over the staff cost breakout. This is the 5-year projection for 2019 through 22 based on slides 13, 5-year projections and the assumptions with no tax increase in the projected years. So you can see here for the final budget of 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22, you can see that salaries make about 39% of the budget, retirement about 12.8%, insurance about 8.9%, other employee benefits 4.5%, for a total salary and benefit contribution of about 66.14%, all the way up to about 68.21% in 2022. Are there any questions on any of the information so far that I had presented? Because I know it's a lot of information. I know many of you have seen this multiple times, but I wanted to make sure that we're doing you due diligence here. Next slide, which will be slide 16. This is the concise summary report. It outlines the actuals for 14, 15, 16, the budget for 2017, the approved preliminary budget of 2018, which we approved in January, the April update, the final proposed, and the final budget. And you can see all those numbers associated with the revenues, the expenditures, the net operating balance, and the fund balance. You'll notice that in the final column under final 2018, the dollar amount under debt service and transfers and expenditures includes the $1.9 million that I previously mentioned, as well as you will see that under fund balance, that $8.6 million is inclusive of the $800,000 that I had said would be ending 2017. So we flip to the next slide. That's just a graphic showing the revenue breakout. The next several slides talk about the assumptions associated with this year's budget. Those assumptions talk about the revenue. There's no new changes on that from what you've previously seen. The next slide, which is slide 19, it talks about the real estate taxes. It outlines everything this evening. There was an agenda item that for next week will be for your approval for the Homestead Farmstead Act in the amount of $2 million as listed on slide 19. Under slide 20, we talked about the Act 1 index and the exceptions and how we handled that as a board of 10. The next slide, the expenditure summary is as a graphical for your information, and then it talks about all the assumptions from the preliminary budget all the way through June. I just want to talk about the June update, if I could. So on page 25, or slide 25, and I'll wait till you get there. On slide 25, there's a listing there for the June final as of 6/14/2017. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the debt service level allocation of $325,000 for 2018 and forward has been added and allocated according to the budget and this presentation. The non-public budget expense amount of $6,410 was also added to the PDE 2028 and all of the other relevant slides. The property casualty insurance, now this is the big one that we were waiting for. We were actually able to reduce from plan to plan, from year to year, of about $80-some thousand, but this slide shows the reduction of about $101,000. So what we had actually budgeted in January, not knowing what the cost would be here in June, we have a total reduction of $101,230 versus the plan being a reduction of about $80-some thousand. Next, the state budget. There's no new information on the state budget. Shannondale escrow, no new information on that. Contract settlement projections, no new information on that. It should be noted, as it is here, that the administrators are budgeted at 2.6%, MESPA, Teamsters, MEA budgeted at 0% increase. And as you recall, as it is indicated in the motions for your approval next week, we have a resolution that articulates the board's interest in the use of the budgetary reserve in the amount of $1.915 million to be used for capital and or for contract matters. So if we move to slide 26, it talks about the top 10 budgetary expenditures. It goes from professional educational salaries all the way down to other objects, includes Social Security, interest, things of that nature. Slide 27. Again, major object summary gives you a different look at the numbers and how they relate to from year to year, from actuals to budgets. And then lastly, we have several slides including the information associated with the PDE 2028. It outlines all the expenditures that for your review. And there's an analysis on page 38. That analysis takes a look at what it might mean if this budget were passed next week and what it would mean to homeowners. And it also gives the public an indication of our cost per student analysis based on audited actuals and October 1 enrollments. The next slide, slide 43, is an update to the capital project slide. It just reflects what I told you earlier about adding the $325,000 to each year as the annual debt service run rate. And that then ends my presentation to the board. Other questions?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I remember, and maybe it's something you can't share, but I remember that Shannondale, I remember hearing May in one of our meetings that we might know something in May, and we still know nothing. Is that, I mean, I know it says that on this slide, but can...
Yeah, it doesn't mean we know nothing. It means that we are not on the schedule that I think you're referring to.
Okay.
So we are behind. And that's a matter of the litigation and the process that we're going through.
Okay, and I know I've brought up the 0% with 3 of our groups before, and I understand what the budgetary reserve is addressing that, which is, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That's accurate. Well, that's what the intent is, and that's what the direction was from the Finance Committee, and that's why we have a resolution for your consideration next week.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on the budget? To my left? Anyone? No? To my right? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just real quick, since that was a lot of information, and especially for the public who's trying to follow along and may not have been here last month, basically the budget looks pretty much like it did last month. No revenue numbers changed. whatsoever. There was a small change in salaries and benefits and operating expenses that kind of canceled each other out. And then the biggest one that Dr. Zerbe mentioned was the property and casualty reduction. So I just want to kind of simplify all that information that was kind of thrown out there. The other thing I did want to point out was Dr. Zerbe mentioned the capital project slide, where this does talk about the new debt service of the $325,000 that we've included in there. Unfortunately, the way that would work and the way that we would be able to borrow the needed money is basically the same way that we've had to, well, not we, the prior boards have had to do it, is with a interest first type loan. So you're not really paying a whole lot of principal, we're basically just wrapping it around. So I just wanted to point out those couple of things there. I think that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a real quick question on slide 14, the 5-year projection, where you're including the property tax increases. And those numbers include an average of any salary increases, bargaining unit?
Yes, all of the projections include salary increases for all groups at 2%.
Okay. And then the net operating balance, then that would be transferred into the fund balances, right? That's how you're getting up those numbers? Has there been any talk about how high we're letting that fund balance go by the Finance Committee? What is that number?
How high the fund balance will go or should go?
Both.
We have had...
I know how high it should go. It should be about 8%.
Well, it can't be any greater than 8% of the budget. So we have an item on the agenda for the board's consideration here for next week that we can discuss, and I can talk about it now. But yeah, so I think it's important to know, and I'm just going to go to that item. So it's item 9J. It says commitment of funds. And the motion would reads like this: approve unallocated fund balance ending June 30th, 2017 in excess of 7% of the budget to be committed for use for the facilities master plan. So one of the discussions that we've had with the Finance Committee is that we are projecting about an $800,000 surplus in this year's budget. That gets us pretty close. In fact, let me just pull up a document here so I can speak with the facts. If in fact we were to end with exactly $800,000 in surplus, and given our current ending fund balance our starting fund balance was $7,840,399, we add that to the $800,000, we will likely have a projected unassigned fund balance minus the non-spendables of about 7.33%, which means that we're getting close to the 8%. Now let's say, for example, we have more than 800,000 in surplus, maybe it's 900,000, whatever it may be. As we get closer to that, it creates a challenge for us, obviously, under the law, to continue to proceed with either raising taxes while we have a fund balance, an unallocated fund balance greater than the 8%. So as you can see here, I'm asking the board, as one of many motions that they could take, is to commit funds, which takes it out of the unallocated fund balance and puts it into a designated area for use for a specific purpose. So a lot of districts have done a number of different things. Some have committed funds to help pay down some of the expenditures in PSERS. Some have used it for capital projects, etc. I think from a lot of the discussion that the Finance Committee has had, it would make sense that any dollars getting close to the 8% threshold would be put into a fund that could be used to address some of our facilities needs under the master plan, in place of having to borrow money, which would create greater cost for us. So I think that's generally the concept, and maybe members of the Finance Committee want to chime in there to either elaborate or to comment further. But generally speaking, that's what we're asking for in terms of the fund balance, and that's kind of where we're approaching the 8%. And it's my recommendation that we use that threshold, that 7%. If all works out, it means that $25,000 will be put into that fund.
Okay.
mean, that's
Well, I just wanted to make sure that, we knew exactly what we're going to do about that, because as you see that the fund balance starting to rise, then, and with all the other things that we have going on, especially with facilities, that money is then allocated correctly.
I think it's important that, when we talk about the fund balances, all of you know that we've had this conversation a number of times, that the fund balance is really something to use for one-time expenditures. So while, this 5-year projection does show the use of fund balance to help balance the budget, it's the only way that I can project how we would balance a budget in a year where we wouldn't raise taxes and the expenditures would rise greater than, obviously, the revenue.
Yeah, and that's even in, the projected 2022 budget, you're going to have to eat nearly $1 million of your fund balance just to balance the budget, correct?
Well, that's what it shows, again.
Yeah, that's a long ways off.
These are projections.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is how it's going to be.
Right.
But this is based on what we know and the assumptions that I've shared with you. These are the things that we need to keep in mind as we look at trying to pass the budget on a yearly basis.
All right, thank you.
And Herb, just to clarify a couple of things there, because there was some talk last month and then at the Finance Committee. We'd originally thought that we were actually going to be a lot closer to that 8%, where we're projecting now at 7.33. There was some talk that we might even be closer at 7.88. So during the Finance Committee, we discussed, how much money that was really going to be and where we would fall out. But I did ask for clarification around whether it was including the non-spendable amount, which is about $900,000 at this point, which we include in this slide. You'll see it's a total fund balance. That includes non-spendable. That's not our unassigned amount. And the other thing to note was that the difference in the change of unassigned, so if we went from 7.33, roughly where we are now, to 7%, I believe you're looking at around 200,000, give or take, in terms of what you would take out of your general fund unassigned balance. Just as a FYI for some rough figures, in case you're wondering what the change in percentage would be, it would be somewhere in that ballpark, based off of what we know now. Thank you.
Yep.
Just confirming, we've got a $65+ million nut that we've got to look at for bringing our schools up to speed, and anything we can put aside to help reduce that debt is going to be critical from a budgetary perspective. I think the other thing that jumps out at me is on page 38, when we look at the cost per student analytics, the fact that we're out of the peer group that we picked of the 5 schools, we're considerably higher at our cost per student, and we have to find a way to bring that in line. This budget doesn't get successful in the long run if our cost per student is driven as high as it is now.
I think it's important for the board to know that this isn't the first time we've seen this in terms of the board and the public, and so it's certainly raised some questions, and rightfully so. It's something that's my responsibility to at least, explain why it is the way it is. Not that it's wrong, it's just why is that, and are there some things that we can do to address that, to bring that more in line with our peers, or it's going to take some time, and we look forward to tackling that particular matter. Now again, I just want to make Mr. Winters, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thanks.
So with that said, I just want to make the board aware that we are going to be bringing this budget for your approval next week. We'd appreciate your support on that, and it does come to you through the Finance Committee, and we'll see you next week on that particular matter. That now ends my matters and recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. We know that next week there will be one. Ms. Gorla will be present to give a school transition update. As you know, as part of the agenda, the reports for the committees will be there. There will be no student reports. And And there will be public comment on board action items, board meeting minutes, and then the fiscal items. So for this evening, are there any questions on the list of bills, treasury report, or the budgetary transfers?
Yes, 9F5. We're approving the 0.5% of the earned income tax.
Jim, we're not there yet. Just
Oh,
one
okay,
second. Just the first three.
The first three?
Yeah. Are there any questions on list of bills, treasurer's report, or budgetary transfers? If not, we'll move on to the next item, final budget adoption. Any questions on that? We just presented that information. If not, we'll go on to the next item, budgetary reserve. This is a resolution, and I'd like to read that for you this evening. And it's attached to the agenda. It says, resolved by the Board of School Directors of the Methacton School District as follows. Whereas the Board of School Directors of the Methacton School District, with their approval of the 2017-18 budget, have determined that $1,915,904 budgeted in the budgetary reserve may only be spent to address matters relating to contract negotiations and/or matters associated with Facilities Master Plan, adopted by the Board of School Directors June 27, 2017, with signatures by the Board Secretary President, if approved. Are there any questions from members of the board on that resolution? And let me just preface this by saying that as part of our Finance Committee meeting, it was so discussed and I was so directed to bring this forward to the full board for your consideration. And it is something that we've talked about, I think, in several meetings, so it seems rather appropriate to do a resolution to confirm or to affirm our intent for the use of that money. With no other questions, we'll go on to taxes. There is listed of 6 taxes, from per capita to local service taxes to real estate taxes, earned income taxes, and amusement taxes. Any questions on that? Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, on F5, approving the earned income tax of 0.5% for LP in Worcester. In the event that a township has a surplus from collecting that 0.5%, and if they have a surplus between $750,000 and $1.5 million per year, which gets put into just a general fund, is there any, just how we have to stay within 8% of our fund balance, is there any recourse where the township has to give that either back to the school district or the taxpayers that they have such a high surplus?
I don't know that answer. I don't work for a municipality.
And what I'm getting at is I have a problem, I have issues with approving that line for at least one of the townships, because they do get such a surplus and they do keep such a large amount of money. I mean, we're talking over $8 million just in a slush fund.
And just to clarify, this is just our part of, so there's a 1% tax, so that we're just approving our half, not their half. They need to approve their half. I'm not sure if that's your question or not.
Yeah,
I just wanted to-
that's to those townships. We're going to more or less tax the members of Worcester Township and the members of Lower Providence under Act 511 at the 0.5%. We're not taking...
Okay, so this is our portion
It's our
of
money,
the
yeah. We don't collect their money.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions on the list of taxes? If not, we'll go on to the next item, depositories for 2017. As we do annually, we list the banks that we do business with. They're listed there, the Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Fund, TD Bank, Harleysville, BNY Mellon, M&T Bank, Pennsylvania School District Liquid Asset Fund, U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo, Tompkins, Vist. If there are any questions on that, the next item is insurance carriers and premiums. Approve the insurance carriers and premiums as listed on the attached document. Please note that there was a question at the Finance Committee on this matter, and the response to that is, the question is, in excess liability, there was a limit previously of $15 million. Under the new agreement for 17-18, it's included as $10 million limited. After review and help with from Mr. McCall, the excess liability under the previous plan was in totality, whereas we're getting more insurance with this and a reduction in cost with this particular plan is $10 million per each of the areas covered. So that is an improvement in coverage for us. Are there any other questions on the matters associated with the carriers and premiums?
Just out of curiosity, Dave, is there a recommended guideline somewhere on what the insurance amounts should be? How's that determined?
I do not know. I can find that answer out and have that emailed to the board.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, that's one thing. The other is, has the IU looked at or anybody looked at a consortium within the county of being self-insured? You know, here we have a $10 million limit and premiums near $600,000 a year. So here's something that once you get to the limit where you're going to be able to cover it and maintain that money put aside as a consortium, why has that been looked at for self-insurance school districts within the county as a consortium?
I mean, that's a great question, Mr. Phillips. I can't tell you whether, I have not been a part of that conversation at the IU level. We often do look for ways to pull together our resources and do consortium buys for things like trash and other, commodities, but certainly this is food for thought, and I can bring that to the executive director, and maybe that's something we can look at.
Thanks.
Next on the item
Dr. Zerbe.
I'm sorry.
On that, it's a reduction of $81,000. Have we adjusted the budget for that purpose?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We adjusted the budget $101,000 associated with this. The original budget had $101,000 budgeted and some odd change. And this reduction here, plus that original budgeted amount together, was removed from the budget. And then that money was allocated back into the budgetary reserve. Okay? If there are no other questions on that, the Homestead-Farmstead Act exclusion, this is the typical resolution that you approve on an annual basis as part of the budget process in the amount of $2,008,489.88 for the 2017-18 school year as attached. There are no questions on that. The commitment of funds we just went over. Are there any additional questions on the commitment of funds? If not, we'll move on to personnel items. I want to first thank Dr. Sosnovic for stepping in as an interim director of personnel. So I know he's been sitting up here all night, maybe answering some transportation questions, but this evening we'll give him his first go around at personnel matters. Dr. Sosnovic.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to present for the first time personnel items for your consideration next week. As you can see, we have two resignation professionals, 1 resignation classified, 6 summer temporary employment, 1 change of status administrative, 1 change of status professional, 2 compensated leave for professional development, 3 uncompensated leaves professional, 2 supplemental contracts, and the attachment for N1 is also included, which lists the coaches for the extended pay season. We are asking for you to approve the ESY program staffing for 2017 in the amount listed. Again, there's an attachment adjoining this agenda. Approve the pre-kinder jumpstart program. Again, there's an attachment, and just to note, this will be funded through Title I. Approve the ESL summer enrichment program in the amount identified. Approve 1 classified substitute, 7 volunteers, and the 35 advisements, which is also included as an attachment.
Any questions?
We had discussed last month about whether or not we were going to be voting on advisements moving forward. And I thought that the consensus was that we did not need to vote on advisements and so would not vote on advisements, but my recollection could be wrong. So if anybody else has any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we determined that we weren't going to vote on the advisements. So do we want to address that in terms of how it's presented in the budget or on the agenda? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I do think that we should be informed of the advisements, but as these are personnel moves that are going to happen regardless of the board's action, we had determined that the board was not going to vote on them because it's not it's a meaningless vote. So I think we've got to figure out another way to inform the board without us voting on it.
I think we should have it under the superintendent's report, only because that's a non-voting item there, if that's what the board desires.
Yeah, where I was going to suggest that we could have a subheading under here, because it would still fall under your personnel items, where you have a voting items, and it would be A through whatever we get to, and then non-voting items, so that when Chris and we vote as a board, you approve all the voting items, and the advisements still stay in the same section where they would belong. That would be my thought.
I was just going to say, just leave the same for the work session, and when it comes to the voting meeting, it's just not there. I mean, he just advises here rather than at the voting meeting where we have to vote. But
I agree that it's not something that we should be voting on, and I think it could be left as it is, and we just approve items up through T, and that would be the motion. That's what you said, Mike.
I would prefer that we do add some sort of a subheading, because I think that, as we've learned over the past couple of years, that when you don't have a record, sometimes things can fall off just through turnover within the board and administration. So having something
Okay, so I'm going to take all your comments under advisement, and we will have it adjusted to properly reflect what non-action you will have on this particular item next week. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on the personnel items?
It's not a question, and it's just a comment, and it's not to, I always used to sit in the audience at these meetings and wonder why nobody ever had questions about resignations. And I would always privately ask about them. And I think it is important to note, sometimes we can't discuss resignations because it might be of a private matter. But it is something noteworthy in a couple districts in our area. Our couple districts in our area, Methacton, Springford included, are losing teachers to better paying districts because of many reasons, including their tax base. And I don't bring that up to be controversial or anything. It's just something to note. And it's just something to be aware of. It's happening everywhere. Every district is in a different financial situation, but it is something to be aware of as a board. I think it's important to note that, because we do have 2 resignations this evening.
Are there any other comments on personnel items? If not, we'll move on to curriculum and programs. Dr. Katona.
Okay, good evening. There are 4 items under curriculum and programs. The first 2 are with regard to providing ongoing support to our K4 and K5 teachers. The first being for the continuation of the the K4 math grade level liaisons as we continue through our second year of implementation of the new math series to continue to add support to teachers. And the second is the K5 ELA grade level liaisons. This would be something to add for next year for the first year of the new ELA series. There is an additional contract under this one, making it 7 because we do have Skyview included in this. We also have on for your approval the Memorandum of Understanding between Montgomery County Community College and Methacton High School for their dual enrollment credit program. And we have some social studies curriculum for your consideration, again, as we've been bringing to you different curricula over the last couple of years for your approval. This is a social studies curriculum for grades 5 through 8, which was last revised in the summer of 2012.
Any questions for Dr. Katona?
Yeah, just one question. For the dual credit program, the memorandum of understanding with Montgomery County Community College, just because it is a 12-page document, is there any significant changes from prior years in terms of this document, or is it pretty much what it has been in the past?
It reflects very much what it has been in the past.
Thank you.
Mr. Winters, go ahead.
Yeah, and Dr. Katona, on B, when we talked about the ELA program, we also discussed these providing the proper support to our staff. So I want to highlight that this is the part of the investment that we had for changing the program, and I didn't know if you had any comments towards how they support, how you see these liaisons, the establishment of this supporting and the rollout.
The support role would be very much modeled after what we've been doing with the math. The teachers would be the initial contact at each grade level for other teachers at their grade level when they have questions or concerns about something that they're using or a strategy associated with the program, whatever it might be. They would then, those liaisons would then connect directly with our teacher on assignment for ELA. They would have meetings at different times throughout the school year with the teacher on assignment to discuss what areas they need to consider. Do they need to be looking at assessments? Do they need to maybe be making some revisions? Are there some things that teachers are noticing in terms of some of the materials that they're using, some things that are working better than others, et cetera, and continuing to work with the curriculum, making revisions, updating calendars, et cetera. So there's a lot that for all of the teachers to have to do on their own would really be too much for them and to deliver appropriate instruction in the area. So that's why we're asking for those positions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, you have 7 supplemental contracts for that item B, and isn't it grades K to 5? Is that 6 grades, and is there an extra?
It is one for each grade level plus a special education teacher.
Any other questions for Dr. Katona? And just to remind everyone, Dr. Katona will be sitting in this chair next week, and she'll be charged with helping you approve the budget and any of these other items. Next on the agenda is policy. Under first reading, there are 9 policies, and for your approval next week, under second reading, under 12B, there are 6 policies, policies 701, 08, 10, 11, and 715 and 916. Are there any questions on the second reading policies at this point? If not, we'll move on to the next other items. Under 13, gifts and donations. There's a gift for a bell kit, bracket, and mallets from an anonymous donor for Skyview Upper Elementary School, value $100. Trips. Approve the trip for the Methacton High School's Habitat for Humanity to BuildOn.org conference at Roosevelt University in Chicago, Illinois, July 26, 2017 through the 28th. No cost to the district. The PAYS survey. Authorize the administration to work with the Pennsylvania Youth Survey Project to administer the 2017 PAYS survey to students in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12. No cost to the district. And lastly, under other, Bucks Montgomery County Schools Health Care Consortium, we would now ask, and it'll be on the agenda, well, there's a line here for it now, it will be to appoint our Director of Business Services, Timothy Bricker, to serve as the management trustee for the Bucks Montgomery County Schools Healthcare Consortium, effective July 1 through June 30th of 2019. And then on the agenda, there are dates for the board's calendars, old business, new business, courtesy of the floor. But before we do any of that, are there any questions on any of the other items under 13? Yes.
I just wondered if you could tell us more about the PAYS survey.
The good news is Dr. Angstad is in the audience, and I'm going to ask her if she might explain that a little bit for us. Yes, please.
Okay, so the PACE survey is administered every 2 years to students in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12. And what it does is it looks at students' perspective on not only the school environment, but also things such as alcohol, tobacco, behavioral issues, mental health, depression. So it allows us, even bullying is included in that survey. So it allows us to get the students' perspective. We get a recap on this survey for our district, as well as for the whole county that participates in the survey. In addition to that, we also acquire some credits by doing that. And that money is given to us in ways of appropriate preventative as well as intervention type programs through Carson Valley is our agency that does that for us. So by participating in the survey, we get some credits, and those credits are able to be used for programs within our schools.
Just one additional question, because Policies Committee has had surveys on our mind for quite some time here. And in regards to the survey itself, you mentioned that we get our results as well as benchmarking data. Do we then use that, those results and the benchmarking to, change anything, or to make changes? Or?
Yes. So last year, or 2 years ago, I'm sorry, when we got our PACE surveys result, we actually examined all those results at the leadership retreat that we had as administrators, and then we looked at that as part of our strategic plan tied into the whole child, to look at the interventions we have, the programs that we're running. We would continue to do that same thing to make sure that we have the right supports in place to help our students.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't
Go ahead,
see
Kim.
Scott.
Kim, you're going first.
We seem to be on the same wavelength tonight. So I'm not sure if you're going to know this off the top of your head, Dr. Engstedt, but how far back does the PACE survey go? So how much historical data is available with that?
At present, I know that there's been at least 4 administrations here in Methacton. So it may go back further than that, but I know we participated at least 4 times.
So that would be a total of 8 years if it's every other. Okay.
I'm not sure they were consecutive years.
Okay,
but
thank you.
At least 4 times.
Just real quick, this is more of an administrative question. What is Tim Bricker's start date?
It is, as of Monday, it is the 29th of June.
So just a technical question, can we appoint him before he's officially an employee of the school district?
Monday is the 26th. And so the board meeting is the next day.
I understand that. I'm just,
Well,
it's just a question whether we can appoint somebody who's not an employee.
You've authorized the employment of him.
Yeah, I know.
And as such, he signed his
technically.
he signed his contract. He just can't start until the 29th.
All right, so you
So I'm recommending we appoint him. He's not going to actually start in that duty until July 1st.
Okay.
And therefore, he'll be on board by that time. I think you're fine. Thank you. Any other questions? So if no other questions, any old business?
The dates for the calendar, I don't think it really matters, but while we're here, and I know it's in my minutes, and it doesn't have to be changed, but just for the record, we did add an education committee meeting, August 7th at 6:30.
And just a long...
I'm sure we have all those committee meetings. They're probably not advertised yet. That's why they probably didn't get there. But Donna Coons is well aware of it. She's the one scheduling it. Yep. Anything else? Any new business?
Last week, the Methacton community lost one of our graduates to addiction, and it's not the first time that it's happened in recent years. In the time that I've been on the board, we've heard about what we're doing for bullying prevention. We've heard about a little bit about mental health. In hearing that we are eliminating the SAD program, and for various reasons we're doing other programs, in light of the fact that we've talked about adding a 4th mental health counselor at the high school in Arcola, we've got the PACE survey coming up. I'd like us to dig a little bit deeper into how we are dealing with what's a nationwide opioid crisis and what we are doing in our schools in terms of drug prevention. We have recently adopted a policy for keeping naloxone on school grounds so that if we had an unfortunate circumstance of an overdose on school property, we could deal with it. It's not a topic I've heard enough about. And it's very much on my mind right now, and I think it's on a lot of people's minds in the community, and it seems to be happening closer and closer to home. So it's something I'd like to see us explore more as a board in the months ahead.
I would just thank you for bringing that up, Kim, and I have to say, even as education chair, I agree with you. We just discussed the professional development, and the teachers were asking for mental health, and it's supposed to be listed for next year's part of professional development, and we have been saying the word mental health, we've been saying the words anxiety, but we have not been using the term drug addiction, and as much as we should be. So thank you for bringing that up, because when I say those terms as an education chair, I do mean drug addiction as well, and we seem to not say, we say mental health, we say anxiety, and I know it's on Dr. Engstad, Dr. Katona's, and the committee's mind, but I will second just I will reiterate what you're saying.
Your comments are accurate in terms of it's a challenging issue. And I think that, unfortunate, in our geographical area, according to the authorities, we live in a hotbed of that activity, and that's really unfortunate. For all the good things that we have in our community, we also have something that's unfortunately often hidden because it's hard to deal with, whether you're affected directly or indirectly. We as educators come across a lot of great children. All of our children are great, but a lot of great children that have, unfortunately made some unconscionable choices at some point, and we experience and suffer along with them. I can say that in the past couple of years, we've had some pretty groundbreaking events here to recognize the opioid addiction and drug addiction, and Dr. Gallagher-Landis and her administrative team, along with Dr. Engstad and probably many of our faculty, were involved in two episodes, or two specific programs that I'm familiar with, both kind of starting the whole process of really opening the dialogue, not only with our students and our staff, but with the community. Now, while our students have seen these programs, one referred to as NOPE, narcotics, something prevention education. What does it stand for, Susan? Yeah, it's NOPE. I don't know it, but NOPE. It's a program that was participated by our local Lower Providence police force, as well as participated by some of our staff, because they've experienced in their own families some of the tragedies that you're speaking of here recently. In addition to that, we also had a presentation from.
There was a forum.
With the forum, but we had Mark Wahlberg's brother. I don't know what the name of that program was, but that was a nationally known program.
If Only.
I'm sorry?
If Only was the name
If Only,
of the
I'm
film.
sorry, okay. So those are two programs that, I think our administration, our staff, recognized that it was, an issue and something we need to address. Is it enough? Maybe it's not. But I want you to know that we've taken some steps, and I think you're right. Every time, unfortunately, there's a tragedy like this, it gives us, notion to say, hey, let's go back and look and see what we're doing. And we deal with this on a daily basis as well through our student assistance program, and our teachers and our healthcare professionals, as well as our county agencies are on top of that and are addressing the issues both from a social, academic, and unfortunately sometimes addiction angle. So thank you for bringing your comments up. Certainly, that'll be a topic of conversation for us to kind of review, are we doing enough? And probably not, but we just got to do more. And then that's what I think, we ought to figure ways to get that done. So thank you.
That's by no means did I mean to intimate that we're not doing enough, because I don't, honestly, it was, I guess, more an admission of I don't know what it is that we are doing.
I don't know what enough is, but whenever there's a tragedy like this, I can't say we're doing enough. I mean, there's, could we have done something else? I don't know. But, it's a challenge. It's something that we recognize, and by all means, is something that, as a school entity, when we're dealing with our children on a regular basis, we need to make sure that we have proper protocols and training of staff, et cetera, to help best deal with it when we can.
Okay.
I just want to add some positive towards what Kim said, if there is a positive. I think the orientation I attended at Arcola a few weeks ago with Ms. Mangano, Mr. Creedon, and Mr. Mueller really took an approach, a whole child approach of a conversation to parents and students in a way that was very refreshing. That was the hour was spent primarily on the experience of going into our Arcola school and the bigger aspects, not just the educational aspects. So I think a shout out to the Arcola staff and administration for putting that together and a step in the right direction that helps start addressing some of those issues at the middle school level. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to courtesy of the floor. There are an awful number of people in the audience tonight, so if we could form a line for anyone who would like to speak, just to keep things a little bit more orderly, I'd appreciate it. And if we could just keep things respectful. I know last month things kind of devolved a little bit, so if we could just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Adam Slavin. I live at Stella's Way in Collegeville. I'm here tonight to offer a few comments and recommendations to the school board, the district, the union leadership. Before I begin, I would like to share just with the board members that I'm a former Methacton High School teacher of 7 years, from 2004 till 2011. I no longer work for the district, but my wife and I recently decided to move to Collegeville because we believe strongly that the teachers in the audience, people sitting in the front of the room, the community, can make a great school district for our kids. Albert Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I've chosen to speak tonight because I believe the root cause issue facing each contract negotiation, and I want to be clear, it has not necessarily to do with this one, but ones dating back a really long time, really have to do with the teacher's salary schedule. I know there are many issues on the table for negotiations, which I will not address at all tonight, because I don't believe those items speak to the heart of the issue. When I began teaching at Methacton, I was handed a contract that contained a salary schedule with 15 steps. I know it's not the contract, the outlined steps that are set forth, but when you receive that as a teacher, you start to look at it and it outlines your future and you believe in what's been presented to you. And the more I spoke to teachers that I'm sure even the audience tonight at 25, 30 years, they spoke about it taking 20, 21, 22 years to reach that pinnacle at the top of the salary schedule. Teachers that are in the thick of it now, knowing that much is going to be the same, that the many freezes that take place can be challenging. The salary schedule needs adjusting. The jump steps at the end of the scale are an issue. The district and the union would be better served if there was linear growth throughout the scale. The frustration that occurs every 3 or 4 years has created a culture of frustration, not only for our teachers, but also our children. It affects them. It's a distraction to the educational process to have issues each time negotiations begin. Every time a contract is agreed upon, we choose to ignore this issue, and it continues to remain the biggest sense of frustration when negotiations arise again the very next time. Stop putting a Band-Aid on the issue. Please don't view these as pro-union or pro-district comments tonight. I'm here to provide my perspective of what I truly believe to be the root cause that continues to plague our school district each and every time there's a contract negotiation. These changes don't need to improve the financial pockets of our teachers, but instead provide a salary schedule that makes sense and one the district can stick to. Other important items could be successfully negotiated if this didn't always stand in the way. I believe the union and the district are both at fault when it comes to fixing this issue. When will people decide that enough is enough? When will people look at this problem and tackle this issue? It needs to be something that makes sense, but also works. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is insane. It matters to me less that this upcoming school year will pass with or without a strike. What matters is finally recognizing that it is time to fix the heart of the issue. In the long run, the strike will serve no purpose, and it will benefit no one. It will simply be a statement of frustration. People sitting at the negotiating table owe it to our community to make a long-term change that will create a culture that minimizes frustration during contract negotiations. There are a lot of additional things that I could say tonight, but I don't want to deviate from my main message. I would like to charge our board members to ask the right questions. What do the jump steps look like at the end of the contract? Why don't we have a linear schedule? How often in the past 30 years have teachers been frozen without an opportunity to regain their steps? It's good data to look at. But more importantly, is fixing the salary schedule a main focus of this negotiation? Alongside making sure the district has a long-term financial plan to faithfully stick to the schedule provided to our educators. Culture is important to any organization. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. The culture and relationship amongst our teachers, administration, community, and kids is impacted by this root cause issue. We shouldn't have to deal with such difficult contract negotiations each time the contract is up, but yet we do. Again, please don't view these comments as pro-union or pro-district, because my intent tonight is to provide you with my perspective of that root cause issue. I'm passionate about my own children, my profession, and my community, and I always look to improve this community now that I'm one of its members. I charge our union leaders and our district leaders to faithfully work together to address the issues that has plagued this district for so long. So good luck, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
I'm supposed to have someone else up here with me. I'm Jenny Geis, Woodland kindergarten teacher, with my lovely Woodland field trip shirt and support. And this is...
Hi, I'm Anthony Maid. I teach at the high school.
We are here to read two short statements on behalf of our MEA co-presidents who were not able to be here tonight. MEA would like to acknowledge the 3 high school clubs that Mr. Spiewak presented tonight for approval. We would also like to ask the board what their plans are for approving the other 50-plus clubs that are currently being sponsored by MEA staff members on a volunteer basis at the high school and clubs that also exist at the other building levels. Second topic, we are here on behalf of the MEA co-presidents to share that the MEA teacher's contract expires at the end of June, as we all know. We are negotiating in good faith and always have. We are here to say that our MEA members deserve a new and fair contract. While there have been negotiation meetings, the process is moving slowly, and we feel that the district and community should know that MEA took a strike vote in May. The vote was an unanimous yes in support of our negotiations team to authorize the strike. Thank you for your time.
Andrea, I just wanted to comment. You asked about teachers that are resigning, and you have 2 resignations tonight. I just wanted to point out that both of those teachers left Methacton. Neither of those teachers left teaching. One of them is a Methacton High School alumni. So that's just to answer your question.
Hi. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you.
As a board member, I kind of lose my ability to speak as a member of the public. However, I feel it necessary, and I kind of wrote things down before. I didn't know where to put it, new business, old business, with HR, but I do feel it's important based on Mr. Slavin's comments and MEA's comments. Some of you may or may not know that I knocked on over 900 doors to be able to sit up at this table. So sorry if I get emotional. I knocked on those 900 doors because I did not want what has happened to me as an educator to happen to the people that teach my children and the children in my community. I have nothing to do with negotiations because I'm not allowed, it's a conflict of interest. I'm also a union member, for those of you who don't know. I work at a neighboring district. We also made that same strike authorization vote. And I do not want to get into details, but I do think it's important. I can't speak for the board, and I will not.
And if I could just...
Sure, please, because I don't want to misstate.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, we can't talk about contract.
Understood, and I just...
You understand that?
I do understand that. They have been very good about keeping me in the dark, because that's the way it needs to be. Every once in a while, what's going on? And I don't know what's going on, because they've been great about that. And I just want to wish, I want, as a community member, to say, I know that the Methacton administration board wants it to work out and for you all to work out. When I said I'm here is because I needed to know that my contract, not yours, has the following: no tuition reimbursement, no sabbatical.
Excuse me, if I could...
Okay, all right, that's why, I appreciate that. I just want to also say, I agree that we would all like a fair contract from a parent, from a community member, and that's that.
If we can get back to the courtesy of the floor, please. Anyone else?
That was my courtesy of the floor.
Is anyone else? If not, recommend that we take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Second. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.